granniopteryx, granniopteryx. She knows the truth, she's linking every link.
Hello! Anyone who says that ideology is free because it's just thought should look no further than the Sandy Peggie case to see how expensive ideology can be, because this court case has been rumbling on. It's spent hundreds of thousands of pounds now, thousands of man hours and woman hours, a lot of stress and strain. And I'll give you a quick recap if you haven't been keeping up with this. This is Sandy Peggie. She's a nurse, or she was a nurse, 30 years in the A&E department, mostly, at Victoria Hospital in Kirkcaldy, Fife. And she objected to sharing a female changing room with a man dressed as a woman, a person who prefers to call himself Dr. Beth Upton. And I keep seeing him referred to as she all the time, which is diabolically confusing. But there you are. I don't and will not refer to him as she until he has had the operations that make him, at least outwardly, resemble a woman. Right now, he's not even trying. They were both working in the same accident and emergency department. Nurse Peggie could have gone higher up into administrative work, but she preferred the A&E department. She really liked nursing, and look what the NHS Trust has done to her. The Tribunal has now reached a conclusion, which the BBC refers to as a partial victory. They have upheld Nurse Peggie's claim for harassment, but only against the NHS, which they said had approached her problem in a procedurally wrong way. They threw all Nurse Peggie's claims against Dr. Upton, they threw them out. They dismissed them. Now, let's go into this, because there's one really important point that I thought of that obviously the honourable judges on the tribunal just don't seem to have considered. But yeah, you know the whole history now. This is Dr. Beth Upton, and as I have pointed out in previous videos, a typical male skull there with a heavy brow ridge and a higher, more rounded forehead, because the bones are thicker there. They're thicker for a reason. Men evolved to fight other men, not necessarily over territory, but very often just for access to females. That is the standard primate way of doing things, unless you're a bonobo, of course, but we'll leave those on one side. So they had to be heavier in the head, because they were constantly banging heads against each other. A heavier head meant thicker neck, wider shoulders to take that weight. And that's one of the reasons for the male shape. And this chap here has that look, the chin and the forehead and the brow ridge of a man. Now, obviously, there are going to be some women who are a little that way built anyway. But this is Dr. Beth Upton with an incipient moustache there, despite the hormones I suppose he might be taking. Anyway, the Employment Tribunal, which took place earlier this year, was high profile and controversial. So what happened? It says here, Sandy Peggie and Beth Upton exchanged words in a female changing room. Sandy Peggie said, "You shouldn't be here." Upton goes wringing his handkerchief to NHS Fife about Nurse Peggie's opinions, and she is suspended. She launches an employment tribunal. This is in May 2024. January 2025, the NHS and Dr. Upton tried to have the employment tribunal heard in private so the doctor could be anonymised. I mean, that's so that people wouldn't know that this chap in a frock, the doctor, is that particular doctor, I suppose. After all, why should the patients know that the person who's administering medications to them has a mental problem? No. I mean, I think even what I call the real trans people, not the show-offs like this, the real trans people will, at least the ones I know, agree they do have a mental problem. They're just trying to manage it as best they can. OK, so were they here February 2025, 10 days of evidence. In July 2025, NHS 5 says that this whole employment tribunal thing, 259,000. I wouldn't mind an extra 259,000. It might pay off a mortgage. And that was only up to that date, of course. Ms. Peggie, it says here, launches a further legal action against NHS 5 and the senior managers. September, oral submissions heard. No, I'm not going to make the joke that immediately jumps to mind. The nurse launches legal claims against NHS 5 chief's executive. I mean, you've got to understand, she's a nurse, 30 years experience. In a few years she might retire. But being ditched like this, any sort of pension is going to be very badly compromised. So that's why she is launching these legal claims. And then, of course, there's the stress and worry of all of this. Nobody I shouldn't think many people enjoy actually going to law. It's a soul-destroying, horrible, tortuous procedure, however innocent you are. December 2025, she wins a claim for harassment against NHS 5, but other allegations of discrimination and victimisation are dismissed. And that is particularly where I believe the judges are wrong. But I'll get to that in a minute. So that the reason that the tribunal found against the NHS was they said they should have stopped Dr. Upton from using the changing room until things had been clarified or some workaround had been come up with, for instance, rotas. Now, here we have a situation where the NHS is in serious financial trouble, and one of the things that they're expected to do is rearrange the rotas so that Nurse Peggie isn't on the premises at the same time as Dr. Upton, or at least in the A&E. Because it turns out, I asked Grok, why wasn't Dr. Upton using the doctor's changing room? And so I'm going to get to that in a minute because it's really rather interesting how they worked out why he was doing that. And one of the reasons was that particular nurse's changing room was right next to the A&E, so it made it more convenient for people who worked in the A&E. So it was a matter of, well, you might say, public convenience. No, you might not. I don't know why I should be finding any fun in this. It's a horrible situation. So they said they should have stopped Dr. Upton from using the changing area until the rotas had been dealt with. So, as I said, that is just another expense for the NHS, which is running out, waiting lists and available doctors and all the rest of it, lengthening to lifetimes, literally lifetimes in some cases. And they're expected to worry about rotas just to avoid. It's like, that wedding where you've got all the relatives that aren't talking to each other and you're trying to arrange the tables so you don't have a fork fight over the wedding breakfast. Anyway, the health board's reference to unproven claims that Miss Peggie had put patients at risk were also deemed to amount to harassment. So they were trying character assassination. And as a matter of fact, I just want to bring this in here. I might make another video about this, but this is a case here. It seems pretty much like standard practice now. Jamie Michael, who is an ex-Marine, here's a nice photo of him, putting his life on the line for, at the time, Queen and Country, which is what Nurse Peggie was doing as well, working all hours for the good of the people of Fife, but I'll get back to that. Triggered by the Southport horror and under the impression at the time that the murderer was an illegal migrant being housed in a local hotel, he said, we have to talk to our politicians about this. We have to organise and make pressure groups. He wasn't talking about violence at all. He was prosecuted for, I don't know, hate speech or something, pleaded not guilty. The jury, he had a jury, which David Lammy is now trying to get rid of, but that's something else. He pleaded not guilty. The jury found that he was not guilty in 70 minutes. We all thought that was a big, marvellous win. He went back home, carried on doing what he was doing, and then discovered that the local education authority were saying he was a danger to children because of his patriotic views and stopped him from football coaching. And that's all. It seems to be that the standard way that various authorities want to get at people now are to say they're a danger to vulnerable people, children, old people, patients in a hospital. That's all they could find. I don't know whether anyone here remembers Blake's 7, but in the first episode, I think it was, Blake was offered, he was talking up against the system, and he was arrested and he was offered a way out. He had to sign a confession. They don't actually read out what the confession was, but he's reading it and he looks at the I've forgotten what her name was, the Grand Inquisitor. Anyway, he looks at this woman and he says, but these are all crimes against children. Goodness me, that programme had such amazingly good scripts, which was let down by wobbly screen sets. And it was a terrible shame because it was a wonderfully prescient show. And I keep thinking of that when I see these cases. Hang on, I'll bring this back. He's a danger to children because of his political views. Anyway, let's get back to this. A separate hearing will take place at a later date to decide on the remedy, which could result in her being awarded compensation. And she'll need it because she is not going to get a pension now. Or if she does get a pension, it will be a very attenuated one. So yes, she'll need all the compensation she can zap them for. But I agree with that. The problem is that we're paying for it. And we're paying for it not because of our fault, but because of not only NHS Fife, but her union as well. They could have stopped this right from the start, but they were on the side of NHS Fife. Anyway, the last 2 years have been agonising for me and my family, and so now the whole thing is over. I'll have much more to say in the coming days once I've been able to properly consider the lengthy judgment and discuss it with my legal team. For now, I'm looking forward to spending a quiet few days with my family. Well, just in time for Christmas, I suppose. The campaign group Sex Matters, which backed Sandy Peggie in the case, said it was disappointed in the approach taken by the tribunal. So am I, yeah? And on the other hand, a discrimination lawyer, Robin Moira White, who works with Translucent, a trans-led advocacy and human rights organisation. I would say you can't be a trans advocate and a human rights advocate at the same time. I think the two are probably mutually exclusive, the way they're set up right now. And she said the ruling was a sensible, balanced judgment. Well, look, let me just go over back to what happened. The tribunal dismissed all claims against Dr. Upton. That is, they reckoned he had not harassed Nurse Peggie by being there. Nurse Peggie said she felt uncomfortable, embarrassed and intimidated at being forced to undress in the presence of an obvious man. I should imagine she found it also very difficult to share a confined space with someone who was not only bigger and stronger, but who had an obvious mental illness. And now I want to tell you why the nurses' changing room. Well, according to the tribunal evidence, the doctors' changing room was for all doctors, male and female. It was a unisex changing room. So Dr. Upton must have said that to them. The tribunal found that Upton felt uncomfortable using the doctors' changing room this is what they say, due to her gender identity, potentially sharing with male colleagues. So the tribunal thought that Upton was quite reasonable to be nervous about sharing a changing room with men because he thought he was a woman. While that same tribunal considered that when Nurse Peggie said she was nervous about sharing a changing room with a man, well, she was being completely unreasonable. Somebody make it make sense. I'll give you till next time. You can help my channel by subscribing and clicking the notification bell. That's quite important. And by sharing if you're so inclined. Links to my other channels and to donation methods are in the description. But the best way you can help is simply by clicking like and notify. Thank you.